That's not really your world, he said, barely glancing up from his plate. You should stick to what you know. Don't stress yourself out with things like that. It wasn't just the words. It was the way he said them. Like I'd wandered into a room where I didn't belong. Like I was a child pretending to play business while the adults did the real work. He didn't laugh. He didn't argue. He just dismissed me with surgical precision, like my dreams were a mild inconvenience. I felt the air go out of the room. I had been so careful with how I brought it up, testing the waters, layering my excitement under reason. I told him I wanted to start something, that I had an idea I couldn't shake. I didn't expect applause, but I thought maybe respect. Instead, I got a verbal pat on the head. He called it sweet, said it was good to have a little project. A little project. It was the kind of thing you say to a bored housewife trying to stay busy between laundry loads. The kind of comment that makes you feel foolish for even opening your mouth. And worse, it wasn't said out of malice. It was said from a place of complete, arrogant certainty. He truly believed I couldn't handle anything bigger than errands and grocery lists. That night, I lay awake next to him, listening to the slow rhythm of his breathing, while mine was shallow and tight. I had spent years being the dependable one, the one who made things run, who supported his ambitions without question. And yet the second I stepped into my own light, he acted like I was overreaching, like ambition was a costume that didn't fit me. It wasn't a fight. It wasn't dramatic, but it was a fracture. Quiet, but deep. I stopped talking about my idea after that, not because I gave up, but because I realized something painful and permanent. He didn't believe in me. He didn't even try to. So I smiled and nodded when he changed the subject. I let him think he'd talked sense into me. I let him think I was over it. But inside, something hardened. Not bitter, just resolved. He thought I was playing business. He didn't know I had already begun building one. And from that moment on, I made him irrelevant to the story I was writing. Not out of anger, out of necessity. After that night, I stopped asking for space. I stopped looking for support. I stopped waiting for him to see me. I became two people, the wife he thought he knew, and the woman I was quietly becoming. He went to work each morning, assuming I was at home folding clothes, running errands, scrolling through my phone. And I did those things. But in the in-between, during the hours no one accounted for, I was building. I started with what I had. I didn't have a business degree, but I had instincts. I didn't have capital, but I had discipline. I devoured every podcast, webinar, and book I could find. I learned the language of marketing, pricing psychology, copywriting. I kept spreadsheets hidden inside recipe folders, sketched brand concepts in notebooks tucked beneath the bills. He never noticed. I sold my first product out of our garage. A few orders at first, friends of friends, strangers who'd found me through word of mouth. Every time I packaged one, I felt like I was wrapping a piece of my own self-worth. It wasn't just about the sale. It was about proving, even if only to myself, that I wasn't crazy to believe I could do this. He asked once if I was still playing around with that little idea. I smiled, said yes, said it was fun to have something to do during the day. Inside, I was scaling. Slowly, quietly, strategically. When our son was at school and he was at the office, I was on calls with suppliers. When they went to bed, I was mapping ad strategies. I learned how to set up funnels, analyze metrics, track conversions. I taught myself things he couldn't even pronounce, and I loved it. There was a kind of peace in building something that no one could touch. It became mine in a way nothing else in my life had ever been. And because I kept it quiet, it stayed pure, free from judgment, free from his voice. Of course, there were hard days, moments when orders fell through, when customers complained, when I second-guessed everything. And still, I kept going. Because every stumble was mine, and that made every step forward sacred. He didn't notice the small signs. The late nights, the delivery boxes, the books piling up. Or maybe he did, but wrote them off as whims. That was his mistake. He didn't ask questions. And I didn't offer answers. I wasn't being deceptive. I was being self-protective. He had made it clear that he didn't believe in me. So I learned to stop needing him to. By the end of that first year, I had doubled what I used to make in my old part-time job. Nothing flashy, but enough to know this was real. Enough to feel the ground shift under my feet, and I was just getting started. It happened on a Saturday afternoon in front of his family. We were at his mother's house for a birthday lunch, one of those tight smile gatherings where everyone plays polite and pretends not to notice the tension under the surface. I was helping clear the dishes when his cousin, who ran a small construction firm, asked what I'd been up to lately. Just small talk, nothing serious. Before I could answer, my husband jumped in. "She's been playing entrepreneur," he said, chuckling as he handed over a plate. "Got her own little Etsy shop going, keeps her entertained while I handle the real work." The words landed like a slap, not just because of what he said, but because of how easily he said it. Like I was a child with a lemonade stand, like the long nights, the spreadsheets, the strategy, none of it mattered. Everyone laughed, not cruelly, just awkwardly, the way people do when they sense an inside joke they're not part of. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I felt heat rising in my throat, but I swallowed it down with the same grace I'd learned to wear like armor. He looked so proud of himself, like he'd done me a favor by framing my work as a harmless hobby. Like he thought I'd be grateful he'd given me that much attention. But what he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had just closed a licensing deal with a boutique retail chain, 10 stores, a 6-month rollout, projected revenue in the high 6 figures. I'd gotten the confirmation email that morning. I wanted to scream it. I wanted to hold the contract up like a trophy. But I didn't. Not because I wasn't proud, but because I realized something in that moment. This wasn't about recognition. This was about him needing to feel taller by shrinking me. That was the moment I knew I couldn't share anything with him anymore. Not just because he didn't believe in me, but because he needed me small. My growth made him uncomfortable. My ambition was a mirror he didn't want to look into. So I smiled, I nodded, I cleared the dishes, and I promised myself that would be the last time he ever got to speak for me. From then on, I stopped softening my voice to make him comfortable. I stopped letting him reduce me to a punchline. I still said little, but I started preparing for something louder than words. After that lunch, I moved differently. I wasn't just building anymore. I was scaling, strategizing, preparing. That deal with the boutique chain became my blueprint. It showed me I could move beyond single orders and limited drops. I started thinking like a CEO, not a creator. I rented a small storage unit with my own name on the lease. It was barely 300 square feet, but it was mine. I set up shelves, organized inventory, and created a space where I could think without feeling watched. It became my war room, quiet, private, and filled with intention. I brought on 2 part-time assistants to help with fulfillment. I hired a virtual accountant. I started automating my processes. Every dollar I made went right back into the business. I wasn't just reinvesting in the company, I was reinvesting in myself. At home, I said nothing. He still asked the occasional lazy question, "You still doing that little shop thing?" And I'd respond with a shrug and a smile. It was easier that way. He wasn't listening for real answers. He just needed to maintain the illusion that I was dabbling, that I still needed him to define me. What he didn't know was that by then, I had multiple revenue streams. My products were in 5 states. I was consulting for newer entrepreneurs behind the scenes. I had a waiting list for my custom orders, and for the first time in years, I had money of my own. Real money. I opened a separate bank account, LLC in hand. Every cent was accounted for. Every move was intentional. I wasn't hiding the business, I was protecting it. From him, from his doubts, from the constant erosion of confidence that comes when you try to grow under someone who sees you as ornamental. And then there was the mentorship group, women like me, building empires under roofs where their voices were ignored. We met once a month, virtually. We shared wins, failures, templates, and strategies. They didn't just help me grow, they reminded me I wasn't alone. That support became the soil where I planted my next big leap. I started working on a pitch deck for a major retail partnership. A national brand had shown interest in collaborating. It was ambitious, maybe even risky, but I knew I was ready. Every night, while he watched TV or scrolled on his phone, I worked. I designed, planned, and sent emails he'd never understand. I negotiated terms with lawyers. I studied manufacturing timelines and supply chain models. I was building something massive just inches from him, and he had no idea. It's strange what silence can do. At first, I used it to protect myself, but now it gave me power, control. There was something deeply satisfying about watching him underestimate me while I outgrew every box he tried to put me in. He thought he was the provider, the cornerstone, the anchor. He didn't realize I had already set myself free. And I wasn't just dreaming anymore. I was executing. The $1 million deal wasn't a fantasy. It was scheduled. It was real. And soon, he would see. The day the deal closed, I didn't tell him right away. It was a Tuesday. He came home grumbling about traffic, the printer at work jamming again, some intern not replying to his emails. He poured himself a drink, turned on the TV, and asked me what was for dinner. I told him we'd order in. What I didn't tell him was that earlier that afternoon, I'd signed a distribution deal worth just over $1.2 million over 18 months. My business was now a featured brand in one of the largest direct-to-consumer lifestyle platforms in the country. I'd spent weeks negotiating the terms, ironing out logistics, and reviewing contracts with my legal advisor. Every line of that agreement bore the weight of my discipline, my vision, my silence. He didn't notice anything different. I looked calm, steady, just like I always did. But inside, something had shifted. The next morning, I asked him if he wanted to see what I'd been working on. Not in a dramatic way, just calmly, like it didn't matter if he said yes or no. He looked at me, skeptical. "Sure," he said, with the tone of someone indulging a harmless distraction. So I opened my laptop. I walked him through the website, the back-end dashboard, the sales metrics. I showed him the logistics portal and the inventory management system. Then I opened the contract. When he saw the number, he laughed, short, awkward, and disbelieving. "Is this real?" he asked, as if I had forged the entire thing just to prove a point. "It is," I said. "It's been in the works for months." He stared at the screen, scrolling through line items, payment schedules, terms of agreement. The room fell quiet. "You did this?" he asked finally. "On your own?" I nodded, not out of pride, out of certainty. He didn't speak for a long time. And when he finally did, it wasn't congratulations. It wasn't apology. It was confusion. "Why didn't you tell me?" There it was, the question that tried to flip the guilt back on me. I didn't answer right away. I just looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in a while. He wasn't angry. He wasn't even embarrassed. He was something worse, irrelevant to the process. And I think, in that moment, he realized it. "You never asked," I said. "Not really. You weren't interested. You were too busy minimizing it, calling it a hobby, making jokes." "I didn't mean it like that," he muttered. But he had, and we both knew it. The truth is, I didn't need his validation anymore. I had outgrown the need to explain myself. What I needed was to show myself that I could do it, that I didn't have to wait for permission. Later that week, a courier dropped off the first check. I stood there, envelope in hand, while he hovered nearby. "Is that from the deal?" he asked. I opened it slowly, looked at the figure, and nodded. He said nothing. For the next few days, he walked a little softer. He asked a few more questions. He made vague suggestions about helping me scale even bigger, like he wanted to be part of it now. But it was too late. He had watched me grow this alone. He had watched me grind and stretch and build without once recognizing the fire in front of him. I let him watch me close the deal not to punish him, but to let him see what he missed, to show him what happens when someone dares to bet against you and loses. It wasn't a dramatic collapse, no shouting, no slammed doors, just a slow, sinking realization on his part, like watching someone try to catch water in their hands only to feel it slip through their fingers. He started lingering more when I worked, asking what I was doing, offering ideas that didn't fit, trying to involve himself in ways that felt performative. I could tell he was scrambling for relevance, trying to rewrite the story in real time, as if he'd always been a part of it, as if he'd seen it coming. But he hadn't. He had spent years shaping our dynamic, building himself up as the authority, the provider, the realist. My ambition threatened that. My success dismantled it. And once the deal closed, once the checks arrived, once I had something undeniable to show, he no longer held the upper hand. He started saying things like, "We've really done well," and "Look how far we've come." I said nothing, not out of cruelty, but because I didn't need to correct him. The silence said enough. There was a dinner, a few weeks after the deal went public. Friends we hadn't seen in a while asked about the business. I watched him sit there, struggling to decide whether to boast or bow out. He fumbled through half-truths and awkward anecdotes before finally looking at me like I should take over. I did, calmly, professionally. And when I spoke like a founder, like a leader, like someone who had earned the room. Afterward, in the car, he was quiet. "You don't need me anymore, do you?" he said. I turned to him. "I never needed you to begin with. I just wanted your belief. That's not the same thing." He didn't respond. What could he say? The truth was right there between us, heavy and unchangeable. He hadn't believed in me. And now that I'd proven him wrong, the regret sat on his shoulders like a coat he couldn't take off. But I didn't wear it for him. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I was just done. Done trying to explain. Done making myself small. Done waiting for someone to see me when I had already seen myself. I didn't change overnight. That's the thing no one tells you about transformation. It doesn't come with fireworks. It comes like water carving through stone. Quiet, relentless, patient. Healing came to me the way spring creeps into the frost, slowly in soft pulses, without fanfare or permission. It was a quiet rebellion, unfolding one breath, one boundary, one brave decision at a time. After the deal, after the public recognition, after he saw in black and white what he had once called a fantasy, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt released. The way you feel when a weight you've carried so long, you forgot it was there, suddenly slips from your shoulders. Light, unburdened, free. It wasn't the money, though yes, the money came. It wasn't the press, or the headlines, or the photo shoots. It was something deeper, something more personal. It was the moment I realized I no longer needed to apologize for who I was becoming. I had stepped fully into the woman I had always been, and I no longer felt the need to ask for space in my own story. I redesigned my workspace. Not because I needed more room, but because I wanted beauty to match the vision I had carried alone for so long. I hired a team, not out of necessity, but out of intention. Women like me. Women who had also been told to stay small and be realistic. I invested in a coach who didn't blink when I said my next goal was 8 figures. I started dreaming bigger, not just because I could, but because I had earned the right. The business grew, yes, but more importantly, I did. I walked differently, not faster, not louder, just taller. I started speaking with more ease, not to persuade, but to claim. I stopped asking for room at the table. I started building my own. He noticed? Of course he did. He began hovering at the edges of my day, offering to help, asking more questions, trying to stitch himself into a narrative he had once ignored. He was softer, more polite, more careful with his words, but we both knew the dynamic had shifted irreversibly. I was no longer the woman waiting to be taken seriously. I was no longer the wife hoping for belief. I was already miles ahead, building the next thing. I didn't need to announce it. He could feel it. And what I think broke him, quietly, slowly, wasn't the deal or the spotlight or the money. It was the simple, devastating truth that I had done it all without needing him. That his opinion had become background noise. That the woman he once dismissed as playing business no longer looked back for approval, or even acknowledgement. I didn't leave him, not in the traditional sense, but piece by piece, I peeled myself away. Spiritually, emotionally, professionally. And when you reach that level of self-possession, when you finally come home to yourself, there's no version of you that can go back. I don't hold resentment. That's not the story I tell myself. I hold clarity. I hold calm. I hold peace. The kind of peace that doesn't require explanation or validation, just presence. I needed that chapter, the condescension, the silence, the subtle cuts. I needed it to become sharp, not bitter. Certain, not loud. That pressure shaped me. So when people ask how I did it, how I went from a dismissed hobbyist to a $1 million entrepreneur, I tell them the truth. I didn't beg for respect. I didn't scream to be seen. I earned my power in silence. And when the time came, I didn't say a word. I just let the numbers speak for me.